Magic Man, everyone's favorite antagonist, known for faking homelessness, turning Finn into a foot, and missing his shoddy. Whenever he shows up in an episode, you're guaranteed to see something unconventional. Tricksters, known for being powerful agents of change, force us to see things as they truly are through the form of tricks, with an element of playfulness, although most tricksters, as is also the case for Magic Man, go a little too far, often being portrayed as cruel and unfeeling. It's important to know that tricksters don't operate in the bounds of morals. Magic Man doesn't work within good or bad, obviously. He simply strips away normal conventions through his sadistic inclination towards the destruction of rules, boundaries, and restrictions, both moral and physical. He works in the realm of both the beautiful and the ugly, with the primary goal being only to show a new perspective, but then in turn a lesson will always naturally follow. He's undoubtedly controversial, encapsulating indifference and being able to laugh in the face of everything that is thought to be serious. Although arguably one of the most hated characters, he is still wise in his own right and potentially deeply misunderstood. The lessons he intentionally or unintentionally teaches are always bittersweet, as you'll soon see, as it takes something painfully absurd to truly move us. For anyone who hasn't seen or doesn't remember Season 6, Episode 18, Everything's Jake, here's a quick rundown.
If you already watched and remember this episode and want to save 8 minutes, skip to the next section.
The episode starts with Jake knitting an outfit for his buddy Bimo. What a sweetheart. The wholesomeness quickly comes to an end when Magic Man, the mosquito that he is, administers a drug within Jake and sings, "The waffle doll shall fall, lest you eat the yellow dough." He flies away and Jake immediately feels tired and lies down. He feels hungry and thinks about getting a snack before he knocks out. Whatever Magic Man did to Jake put him in an isolated world within himself. I'm sure we can all relate. As Jake looks around and is initially confused by everything being made out of him, he thinks about there being a cool city nearby, to which the world responds and creates one before him. This could likely be a reference to the blind idiot god, Azathoth, of the Cthulhu mythos, the creator of everything through his dream, and if he wakes up, everything will cease to exist. As he enters the city, citizens start to emerge from the ground, and everyone starts to greet Jake as if this were normal. It's important to mention that it's understood that all these citizens and characters in the city are part of Jake's psyche. He approaches a shop, displaying some dolls. He thinks about what his kids are going to eat for dinner, and the ground begins to shake. Some of the dolls fall, including a waffle doll. Jake dismisses it as some kind of Jake-quake. Right after this happens, another citizen emerges, but Jake can't recall his name. He introduces himself as Goose, and says he hasn't seen Jake in about 2 or 3 years. While Jake is uneasy about the new guy at first, Goose dismisses his demeanor and takes Jake with him, saying everyone's waiting for him at a party. The partygoers are excited to see him, and even hung up a sign that says, "Welcome home, Jake." The party hall is beautiful, with a huge fountain and many paintings on the walls, showing Jake with his kids, Lady Rainicorn, his parents, and Finn. Jake is shown to be more comfortable, and he and Goose are playing with cards and chatting next to a painting, which is actually a reference to a real-life painting known as The Birth of Venus by Sandro Botticelli, with Jake being portrayed as Venus, the god of love and beauty. Goose then asks Jake about the $5 he still owes him. Jake asks, "What $5?" To which Goose replies, "Cheeseburger cheesecake, ring a bell?" This causes another Jake quake. Goose adamantly tells Jake not to worry about it. Jake says he's feeling hungry, so Goose says he will go get him some nachos. Jake hungrily bites into them but cannot eat them since it is his own flesh. He again thinks about food and sets off more Jake quakes. Suddenly, there's a knock at the door. A sea urchin arrives at the door and tells Jake that the mayor wants to see him straight away. Jake asks him to lead the way. Back in the real world, where Jake is inside his body, Finn asks Jake if he likes cereal in his cake. Jake doesn't respond, so Finn leaves him be. This is an analogy for how even your best friends in the whole wide world will not be able to see when you're truly struggling, and you cannot rely on anybody for The mayor then tells Jake that the city's top scientists have noticed an exponential increase in seismographic activity since his arrival. Jake asks to meet these scientists, so the mayor introduces him to them. They say they want to perform some tests on Jake to find the reason behind the quakes. Jake claims he's already figured it out, telling them the quakes are caused by his hunger. He proves it by asking the scientists to name a food. As one says omelette, another quake occurs. After being told it was a 4-egg chili omelet, an even bigger quake starts and part of the laboratory collapses. The scientists analyze and share their views. One states that it's too early to confirm anything and the evidence is only anecdotal. Jake says it will be over once he has some food from the outside. The scientists don't think this is true, but agree to let Jake try out his idea. A voice from behind objects. Dr. Erik Adamkinson says if Jake goes to the outside world of glob, as they say, his flesh will reconfigure, killing everyone in there. The other scientists dismiss his crazy theory, but Dr. Erik says that they shouldn't risk the possibility and advises them to imprison Jake. The mayor listens to Erik's theory and orders the guards to seize Jake. Jake is then put in a tiny cell guarded by 2 guards. Jake thinks of a bagel, and another quake occurs. Every townsperson has gathered around to watch Dr. Erik go to Jake's glob world to retrieve some food and end these quakes once and for all. He says he will go through the famous Pscyhe hole and get some food for Jake. As he is about to leave, his dad tries to stop him, saying he wants to come along, but Dr. Erik tells him no, saying it is too dangerous and that his mind is unprepared. This could be a reflection of Jake and his own children, the joke being that the dad seems to be the child in this situation, the same way that Jake's kids have matured way faster than him. He climbs up a mountain and hitches a ride on a passing balloon, which guides him to the sky hole. I thought this could be a reference to the classic 1956 film, The Red Balloon. The film is a powerful representation of the imaginative and creative aspects of the mind that can sometimes be suppressed or lost as we grow older. I'll also mention that the group of scientists and citizens cheering Erik on didn't have any balloons, so it most likely came from Jake's party. On the other side of the hole is Finn and Jake's living room. He sees a bear and a rabbit in a movie projected on a screen by BMO. This could possibly be a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave, suggesting a hard truth is about to hit Erik soon. He mistakes them to be the globs, saying they are just as he envisioned. He asks them for food. They don't respond, and he comes to a conclusion that they aren't the real globs, saying they're too ugly. Suddenly, Finn pops up with a mouthful of spaghetti looking like Thulu. This causes Dr. Erik to cry, as he didn't think the globs would be this hideous, and he then gets absorbed into Jake's body. Finn, who is completely unfazed by what just happened, tells BMO to resume the film. Inside, Jake thinks of spaghetti and causes greater quakes. A scene cuts back to the store full of dolls to show the waffle doll falling a second time. Suddenly, Goose appears and starts smacking his jowls together, which grabs the attention of the guards, who abandon their posts and go over to him. Goose knocks them unconscious and goes to help Jake escape. We are then shown one of the most heart-wrenching scenes in any media ever created. He smacks Jake with his jowls and tells him to go eat. Jake is torn, but obliges, and the city is absorbed into his body as he stretches his way out through the hole. Finn finds Jake in the kitchen, eating a can of beans and staring into the distance, and asks if he's okay. A single tear falling from his eye, Jake replies, "Just getting a snack, Goose. Just getting a snack." There's a lot to unpack about this episode, but I'll start with my take on the scientists and Erik Adamkinson. The scientists, or the great minds, are an important set of characters in this episode. They could clearly represent Jake's need for stability, his curiosity, but also his doubts. The scientists being scientists, they comically disregard the personal anecdotes of Jake and themselves, even though the truth is clearly right in front of them. One so-called fringe scientist was able to see clearly. Out of all the scientists, he was one who still kept his childlike imagination and creativity, as also shown by the reference to the balloon, and therefore had the strongest and most accurate intuition, although justifiably seen as a madman. His only flaw was that his solution was impractical or even impossible. This is what makes Erik Adamkinson's death so heartbreaking. He was a true dreamer and idealist, just wanting to do the best for his family and his people. He flew too close to the sun, bearing the responsibility of a god without the power of one, all while keeping his true god imprisoned. Not being able to talk to or to even look at Finn or the projection and their hideousness as they both portray an absurd randomness and indifference towards Erik. I wonder if taking his dad with him would have been a good idea, if they would both crumble or help each other keep their sanity. If Erik couldn't handle it, I doubt his father could either, with his mind being less prepared. There's a strong case to be made that to Erik, Finn represents a state of nihilism or meaninglessness. Hideous, since nihilism bears no fruit, the same way Finn or the projection couldn't answer or even hear Erik's wishes. He was unintentionally tricked and deceived by a false god, and failed to understand that the solution was letting Jake free to flourish as he is the true love, beauty, and God of him and his people, that wherever Jake goes, him and his people will follow because they're one and the same. In Taoism, the natural path is the path of least resistance, which is achieved by following suggestions of nature and not fighting against fate. Erik sadly detached from his true essence, went beyond his nature, and paid the price. In a world full of ducks, everyone needs a goose. A fitting name since he's the chosen one. Accepting that Goose is just a part of Jake's psyche, it's clear that he represents the side of Jake that knows right from wrong. His morality. We all know Jake can be a little morally ambiguous at times.
The Candy Tavern, man. I used to hang out there back when I used to snatch old ladies' purses. Don't worry, I stopped doing that a long time ago. I didn't know it was wrong.
But Jake is still a good guy, and not completely stupid. I think it's no coincidence that Goose appears immediately after the first Jakequake, and continues to mention food items throughout their time together. I believe he is meant to represent the side of Jake that he knows he should be listening to, even if it may seem suspicious and untrustworthy at first. Even though he seemed like a bad friend asking for $5, in reality, there was no $5, and he just needed an excuse to mention cheeseburger cheesecake. He also gives Jake another valuable lesson when he hands him the plate of nachos, which was made out of himself. He shows Jake that there's no way for him to get what he really needs in this world. He cannot indulge in fake sustenance no matter how delicious it looks. He will only be hurting himself. What he really needs is back in reality. This is further shown when Jake refuses to escape prison, even though he's completely able to shrink down and leave. He's concerned about actually killing all the citizens and doesn't want to risk it. But when Goose comes along, he tells him to go eat and doesn't listen to his excuses, even going as far as to slap him twice so he doesn't question it and simply does what he's told. Goose represents the side of us that knows exactly what we need to do, but also knows we could be too stubborn to actually do it without a little push. Everything's Jake seems to be very innocent and solely playful on the surface, but represents many things fundamental to the human experience. The story is straightforward and only becomes complicated when trying to understand it. Understanding that all the characters can be thought of as separate entities, but also as pieces to the whole of Jake and his psyche. Even when Jake had just created this new world, it seemed that all of its people had already been living and having memories there for at least many decades. But what, if anything, was the lesson that Jake learned or was supposed to learn? I believe a few things. A good place to start is understanding what brought him to tears. Just getting a snack, Goose. After Jake had been starving the whole episode, he only hesitantly snacks on a can of beans and sheds a tear. He eats it not out of indulgence, but out of necessity. We should also look back to the Magic Man quote, "The waffle doll shall fall, lest you eat the yellow dough." When Magic Man said this at the start, it's easy to interpret it as a piece of advice or a prediction of the future, as if he's an oracle. But as I said at the start, this is not how he operates. This quote is a trick. It's a trick in how it's set up as a value proposition in which the person should never let the doll fall. A trick leading the listener to believe that if the doll falls, it can never be picked back up. But as we've seen, the doll had already fallen, and not just once, but twice. So what could the part about the yellow dough possibly mean? It could simply just refer to the bagel that was mentioned a few times, or any other food, made of dough for that matter. But this doesn't tell the full story. We know at the end of the episode, Jake instead eats a can of beans, other than any food previously mentioned. It is likely that the writers purposely chose to do this so that we can look for the deeper meaning. If you don't believe me just yet, there is one frame in the episode that proves this to be the case. Back in the lab of scientists, there's a screen behind them, displaying a person biting their arm, and another, which seems to be eating air. You can probably tell where this is going. The yellow dough is Jake. Well, not Jake, but his imagination exhibited through eating fake food. Jake's body can't be satiated with fake food like the nacho sandwiches he was given. It's also most likely the case that this so-called cheeseburger cheesecake is just an example of Jake's use of imagination, as original and creative as it sounds. In the end, Goose not only liberated Jake physically, but freed him from his debts for his use of creativity, expressing that creativity is always free to use when you know where to find it. To tie these ideas together, let's take a look at Jake's biggest fear in the episode. It's made clear when he asks Goose, "What if you and all the Jake peeps disappear, and I can't bring you back?" This is an understandable fear most of us can relate to, not knowing if things can come back once they have gone. It's generally understood that we should be able to let go of things, which is right, except when it comes to things that should stay a part of us in our psyche. This is exactly what Magic Man is trying to say. Yes, there comes times when the waffle doll falls and we must feed our necessities and responsibilities as it's more of a priority in our survival. But we must also eat the yellow dough to feed our souls and not repress our true nature. This episode shows us that we must find a balance, not living only in our heads like Jake, but also not abandoning our true identity and natural path like Erik Adamkimson. Jake was brought back into a familiar world which he couldn't fully remember, a world full of limitless imagination, fun and indulgence, love and attention, the embodiment of blissful childhood. Jake's imprisonment is a warning to us that too much fun and comfort can lead to a state of anguish, especially when we quite literally become hungrier for something more. He fell for the illusion that he was trapped, but he was locked in a prison of his own device. We can also learn a thing or two from Goose, that we should let free in ourselves in what we love and what is beautiful, and poetically live in a way where not only are we grateful, but through our sacrifices we make God shed a grateful tear for us. To end on a good note, I believe the people of Pscyhe did not die. They simply got absorbed back into Jake and will continue to live on as long as Jake does, or perhaps even longer, as the city is not bound to space or time. Thanks for watching this analysis. Comment below any of your thoughts on the subject. I want to hear what you guys think. Hit that subscribe button and check out this other video right here.